Howdy everyone, Henry Films here, bringing you another Red Dead Redemption 2 outfit design video. Today's theme is in the same vein as my Recreating Classic Western Roles video, because it's another video about archetypes, but this time we're exploring the crime and corruption of the Old West and turn-of-the-century America by recreating classic outlaw roles in Red Dead Redemption 2. Without further ado, let's get into it. For our first outlaw look, we have the cattle rustler. So a cattle rustler refers to an outlaw who steals cattle, then brands or sells them as their own. The early West operated on an open-range system where domesticated cattle roamed freely grazing the frontier and were often unbranded or loosely watched. This made theft very hard to trace and a tempting endeavor for otherwise relatively unskilled or inexperienced criminals, but if you could cowboy, you could rustle cattle and probably make better money doing so. This was exacerbated by the cattle industry boom following the Civil War. In the post-war economy and as railroads expanded across the West, the beef and leather trade only grew more lucrative. A cow that'd sell for $4 in Texas would be worth $40 in Chicago. So as you can imagine, cattle rustling became a staple of the West and a signature of its pop culture mythology. As for the outfit, you're basically just making a cowboy. Wide brim hat, chaps, riding gloves, and a bandana for safe measure to hide your identity. Next up, we've got the snake oil salesman. So this refers to a traveling con man who sold fake medicine, usually miracle tonics, cure-alls, or other elixirs, out of wagons or makeshift tents. The name comes from a real product. Chinese laborers in the 1800s used snake oil made from actual snakes as a muscle rub, but in the American West, that got turned into a grift. These salesmen would bottle up alcohol, opium, flavored water, or hell, even piss, slap a label on it promising to cure everything from baldness to bullet wounds, and sell it to desperate and uneducated settlers. Medicine wasn't regulated back then, and people out on the frontier didn't have a lot of options, so the snake oil trade became a traveling hustle, part medicine show, part carnival act. They draw a crowd with music, magic tricks, or hired hype men planted in the audience, then cash in while the getting was good before skipping town by the time anyone realized the scam. Today, it's a classic pop culture archetype, the smooth talker with a flashy coat and a bottle of nothing. As for the outfit, I was thinking loud and on the surface refined, but in reality, scrappy and just bullshit. Now we've got the Moonshiner, or Bootlegger. While generally associated with prohibition, bootlegging goes way back. Liquor was one of the first real outlaw economies in America. If you grew corn or grain, you could make more money turning it into whiskey than selling it raw. It was easier to store, easier to transport, and let's be honest, people like to drink. Moonshiners were the people who made the illegal liquor in secret, out in the woods or in the hills at night to avoid the taxman, working in the moonlight, hence the name. After the Whiskey Rebellion back in 1794, the federal government tried taxing homemade spirits. Evidently, this wasn't popular with many rural Americans, so you had generations of distillers dodging revenuers and building stills in the woods. Bootlegging in this era usually meant smuggling liquor into Indian reservations, dry counties, or just selling it under the table, especially after local temperance laws started popping up in the quiet build-up to national prohibition. When it comes to the outfit, we can all instantly picture that kooky old moonshiner, which is what I went for here, but in reality, just as backwoods hillbillies were bootlegging, so were sophisticated and organized criminals, which leads me to my next look, the gangster. I know when people hear that word they think pinstripes and Tommy guns, but organized crime didn't start with prohibition. Throughout the 1800s and into the turn of the century, cities like New York, Chicago, New Orleans, and San Francisco already had a deep underworld of immigrant crime families carving out territory, like the brutal turf wars over the Five Points in New York or the Black Hand in Italian neighborhoods. So while the frontier had cowboys and cattle rustlers, the cities had crime syndicates running protection rackets, fixing elections, trafficking women, booze, and opium, and kept that money flowing through bribes and muscle. These proto-mobsters laid the groundwork for the full-blown mafia and bootlegging empires that would explode in the 1920s. Specifically out west, crime followed the railroads. Anywhere there was money, there was someone shaking it down. So big towns out west like Denver, St. Louis, San Francisco all had their own criminal underbellies. Saloon owners, gambling bosses, or even opium runners in Chinatown. Outfit-wise, you're looking for the slicker side of crime, a more sophisticated look. These guys weren't robbing trains, they were owning the politicians who decided what got robbed. Let's backpedal a bit to something more traditional because I also just wanted to do a straight-up bandit, the classic Western outlaw. This is your highwayman, your stagecoach robber, your train heister, your gunslinger. For all intents and purposes, bandits were the rock stars of the frontier, famous and infamous, sometimes even folk heroes, and today icons of pop culture, hitting payroll wagons, ambushing stagecoaches, holding up banks, and robbing trains. Most of these bandits ran in gangs. You famously have Jesse James and the James Younger Gang, Butch Cassidy and the Wild Bunch and the Dalton Gang. These guys were famous. In their time, controversial celebrities, but in history, legends. They encapsulate everything mythologized about this free and lawless period of American history, even though in reality their life of violence wasn't nearly as glamorous as it seems. Speaking of a gilded mythology, if you will, I also had to tackle the biggest crooks of them all, the robber barons of the Gilded Age. Industrialists and tycoons who built empires by bending the system and destroying anything and anyone in their path. They made fortunes in railroads, steel, oil, coal, and banking by crushing competition, exploiting labor, and cozying up to politicians. We're talking about names like Rockefeller, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, and J.P. Morgan. These guys didn't steal from banks, they were the banks. They bribed officials, fixed prices, bought judges, and ran monopolies that made it impossible for the little guy to survive. To them, and the justice system they controlled, it was legal and simply business. To everyone else, it was levels of unfathomable wealth, cruelty, and corruption that reflected nothing short of pure evil. They sported three-piece suits, gold watches, top hats, and cigars. Less gunslinger, more empire builder. But make no mistake, these guys left just as much wreckage in their wake.